"We haven't invited you for a reason," my best friend's mom sneered. "You're just a charity case," someone snickered. "Stay in the kitchen where you belong," a voice shouted. I smiled politely. But when the wedding planner announced that the entire event was paid for by me, silence fell like an explosive. They couldn't even look me in the eye after that. My name is Rowan, and if you ask anyone in my life who knew me between ages 10 and 18, they'd describe me as Judas' charity girl. That's what I was called by some of the mothers at school. Not to my face, of course. But I heard the whispers. Always behind closed doors, through walls too thin, from rooms where I wasn't supposed to be. When my mother passed away suddenly from an aneurysm, I had no family willing to take me in. Judith, her best friend since college, stepped up. She had a husband, Owen, and 2 daughters, Daria and Mallory, and a lovely home in a quiet cul-de-sac in Richmond Hill, just outside of Savannah, Georgia. But from day one, it was clear I was not one of them. Judith made sure I had food, clothes, and a place to sleep. But those things came with conditions, unspoken rules I understood quickly. Be useful. Be invisible. Don't expect kindness. Don't expect to be loved. I slept in the utility room beside the washer and dryer. They called it temporary. It never changed. Owen barely acknowledged me unless he needed someone to unload groceries or vacuum the living room. Mallory mostly ignored me. Daria was the exception, for a while. 2 years older than me, she was popular, pretty, and quick to laugh. And sometimes she let me tag along like a puppy. I clung to that. It was the only real affection I had. I did what I could to earn my keep. I woke up early, made breakfast, folded laundry, cleaned bathrooms. If I forgot something, Judith made sure I didn't forget it again. I learned how to walk silently, how to listen without being noticed, how to make myself useful without being a burden. But no matter how hard I tried, I was always an outsider. I got out as soon as I turned 18. Scholarships helped me get into the University of Georgia, and I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover what grants didn't. I poured myself into my studies and graduated with a degree in hospitality management. By 27, I was running my own events company, starting with small weddings in Savannah, then upscale events in Charleston and Atlanta. I built a name for myself. Magnolia Event Company became my life's work and my greatest source of pride. Meanwhile, Daria stayed in my life, but only in curated doses. She'd message me for favors. A last-minute table setting for a birthday dinner. A connection to a local florist. An RSVP list template. I helped without hesitation, even when the messages came less from friendship and more from habit. So when she announced her engagement to Marcus, through an Instagram post, not even a phone call, I was a little hurt, but not surprised. The ring was massive. The backdrop was the beach at Tybee Island. The hashtag? Hashtag finally found my forever. I congratulated her with a comment. She replied with a heart emoji. 2 weeks later, she sent me a message asking if I had venue suggestions near Hilton Head. I gave her a detailed list with pricing and availability notes. A week after that, she asked if I'd help with planning, said she was overwhelmed and didn't trust anyone else. There was no mention of compensation. No offer of payment or contract. I should have known better. But old habits die hard. I threw myself into the project. This was going to be the biggest wedding I'd ever worked on, and I wanted it to be perfect. Not for her, not really, but for me. As proof that I could make something extraordinary, even if I wasn't treated like I mattered. It started small, confirming dates, coordinating tastings, sending mood boards. But soon I was flying out for meetings, fronting deposits when Marcus and Daria were waiting on funds to clear, and micromanaging every tiny aspect to avoid disasters. I kept records. I told myself I'd invoice them eventually. But every time I opened that spreadsheet, something in me stopped. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was foolishness. But a part of me still wanted to be accepted. Still wanted Daria's approval. Still believed, somewhere deep down, that if I did this well enough, they'd see me. Really see me. The turning point came at the bridal shower. It was held at Marcus family's private estate in Charleston. The whole place looked like something out of a Southern Living magazine: wraparound porch, white hydrangeas in tall vases, pastel tablecloths, lemon water in crystal pitchers. When I arrived, Judith's expression tightened. "We haven't invited you for a reason," she said sharply. "This is a family celebration." I blinked. "Daria asked me to be here. I'm coordinating everything." She sniffed and turned away. A younger woman, probably Marcus' cousin, leaned in and stage whispered, "Aren't you just the charity girl they took in?" Someone else laughed and said, "She should be in the kitchen anyway, not out here pretending to belong." I didn't argue. I just left. The next day, I sent a polite email to Daria saying I'd be happy to hand over the project to someone else if she preferred. She replied that she didn't want to lose momentum and appreciated my professionalism. So I kept going. I made sure everything was perfect. And when the rehearsal dinner came, I wasn't invited. No explanation. No apology. I found out from a mutual friend. Apparently Judith said it would be too awkward to have me there. On the day of the wedding, I arrived before sunrise. The venue was breathtaking, an oceanfront property on Hilton Head with an open-air reception area, lanterns swaying gently in the breeze, and a live string quartet. I directed vendors, checked the timeline, handled a meltdown over late boutonnieres, and reminded the officiant when to pause for photos. When Marcus complained about the linens, I had backups on hand. Everything ran like clockwork. That night, during the final toast, the MC, a sweet planner I'd hired to assist me, took the mic to give closing remarks. She was supposed to thank the vendors and remind guests about transportation. Instead, she surprised me. She said, "Before we end the night, I want to acknowledge someone behind the scenes. The woman who coordinated every detail, solved every problem, and even quietly covered the costs when things fell through. This event, every inch of it, was paid for by Rowan Callahan. Not the bride. Not the groom. Rowan." The silence in the room was immediate and deafening. Glasses stopped clinking. Chairs didn't move. Heads turned. Daria's expression froze. Judith's hand fell from her wine glass. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed a fly. They couldn't look at me. But I looked at all of them. Calmly. Quietly. And I smiled. I didn't say a word. The next hour was a blur. People tried to act normal, dancing, sipping champagne, pretending they hadn't just learned that their entire golden wedding event was bankrolled by the woman they'd called a charity case. But you could feel it. The shift. The weight of the truth sitting in the air like heavy fog. Some of the guests, vendors mostly, people who worked events and knew what things cost, gave me quiet nods or murmured thank yous. A couple of Judith's older relatives kept stealing glances at me, murmuring behind wine glasses. No one in Daria's circle approached me. Not even her. Daria avoided eye contact the entire night. I lingered at the edge of the reception area, just long enough to see that everything was continuing smoothly. Then I slipped away. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't wait for a thank you. I got in my rental car and drove to the little Airbnb I'd booked across town. And I slept for 10 hours. The next morning, my phone was full of notifications. 3 missed calls from Daria. 2 from Judith. 1 from Marcus, which surprised me the most. A flurry of texts followed. "Daria, we need to talk. Please." "Judith, you had no right. That was uncalled for." "Marcus, I hope you're happy. You embarrassed us." None of them said thank you. Instead of responding, I opened my laptop and went through the final vendor receipts. I forwarded them all to Daria with the subject line, "Outstanding payments, wedding expenses." I also included a link to a shared folder of photos and documents, and a final invoice for the items I had directly paid out of pocket. I had proof, bank statements, emails, screenshots of text messages confirming they were supposed to handle it later. The total? $41,893. I didn't expect to see a dime of it. But I needed them to know that I wasn't just doing them a favor. I wasn't a servant or a second-class guest. I was a professional. One who had, for reasons I still couldn't fully explain, let her emotions lead her into financial and emotional quicksand. And I was done with that. The texts didn't stop. Judith accused me of exploiting a family moment for my own ego. Daria kept bouncing between apologizing and defending herself. Marcus said he'd be contacting a lawyer if I didn't drop the whole thing. That part made me laugh. He was going to sue me for paying for his wedding? I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I forwarded the invoice again a few days later, this time with a brief message attached. If this remains unpaid by the 15th, the balance will be referred to a collections agency. This is not personal. It's business. Rowan. That was the last message I sent. A week passed. Nothing. 2 weeks. Silence. Then one morning, I got a notification from a payment app, $2,000 from Marcus. The note read, partial. A second notification. $1,500 from Daria. More coming soon. It was almost pathetic. They were scrambling. Maybe out of guilt or fear. Maybe because they realized I actually had everything documented and wasn't bluffing. I took the partial payments, sent updated invoices, and waited. By the 3rd week, I'd received just under half. That was when I contacted collections. I handed it all over, every invoice, every signed agreement, every bit of correspondence where I offered to take on the tasks, and they agreed without ever discussing money. It wasn't hard to build a case. I wasn't some ghost planner working off a handshake. I had documents, proof of transactions, even voice memos from when Daria rambled about "just bill me later." And even if I never saw the rest of the money, it wasn't about that anymore. It was about drawing the line. About finally saying, this is what I'm worth. I returned to work the next day with a kind of hollow ache in my chest. Not heartbreak. Not even betrayal, really. Just exhaustion. The kind that comes from years of pouring into people who only saw you when they needed something. My assistant, Priya, noticed something was off. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah. Just tired of being the one who shows up when no one else does." She gave me a look, equal parts empathy and respect. "Then stop." I took her advice more seriously than she probably meant it. Because that day, I stopped doing favors for people who didn't value me. I stopped answering messages from clients who were friends of friends. I raised my prices. I invested in better systems. I hired help. I turned down events that didn't feel right. And I slept more. About a month later, I got an email from a woman named Corinne who worked for a popular lifestyle website. She said she'd heard about the Hilton Head wedding situation through one of her writers. Apparently the assistant planner had told a friend, and wanted to do a piece on invisible labor in the events industry. I declined the interview. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I didn't want to spend one more minute giving them attention they didn't earn. Instead, I started writing down everything I learned. Not in a blog post or some big expose. Just in a Google document. For myself. To process. To put the pieces together. Because as much as I wanted to say I'd grown up and gotten out clean, the truth was more complicated. Daria wasn't just my childhood friend. She was the last thread tying me to the person I used to be, the invisible girl who folded sheets, kept quiet, and hoped to be loved back just for showing up. That thread had snapped. And I wasn't sure what would come next. Summer turned to fall. The air in Savannah shifted, less sticky, more forgiving. It reminded me of the first time I ever stepped off a bus here, 18 years old and carrying everything I owned in a duffel bag with a broken zipper. That girl would have begged to be where I was now. she would have thought she'd made it. And in some ways, I had. Business was thriving. Magnolia Event Company had 4 full-time staff and a wait list for high-end weddings that stretched into the next calendar year. I was booking multi-day events, partnering with historic venues, even consulting for a hospitality firm in Charleston that wanted help revamping their brand. But something still didn't feel settled. Because even though I had distanced myself from Daria and Judith, I hadn't quite cut the cord. There was still a part of me checking my inbox for updates, wondering if the collections process had gotten ugly, bracing for backlash. And sure enough, it came. But not in the way I expected. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I played the message on speaker as I sat in the office with Priya. "Rowan, this is Frank Pelton. I'm a probate attorney working with the Harriman family, Judith Harriman, in particular. I'd appreciate a callback when you're available. There's a matter concerning an estate that includes your name." I blinked at Priya. "Estate?" She tilted her head. "You think Judith?" "Maybe Owen," I said. I haven't heard anything about him in a long time. I returned the call later that afternoon. The voice on the other end was calm, clipped, and a little too practiced. "Yes, Ms. Callahan. I'm contacting you regarding the estate of Owen Harriman, who passed away about 6 weeks ago. As part of the settlement, there was a provision for discretionary allocations tied to individuals referenced in his personal records. Your name came up." I was quiet. I hadn't heard the man's name in years, and suddenly I could hear his voice again, deep, dismissive, always irritated. He continued. "The amount is modest, $5,000. It was left to you directly, no stipulations. We just need confirmation of your mailing address for processing." "Why would he leave me anything?" I asked before I could stop myself. "I can't speak to that, ma'am. But I did want to inform you that your name being included has caused some tension. I've been instructed to notify you that the family disputes the distribution." Of course they did. I gave him my business address and hung up. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a notebook in my lap. I wrote Owen's name at the top of the page and stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote Judith's. Then Daria's. Then Mallory's. They'd all shaped me in different ways. Judith taught me to survive. Owen taught me silence. Mallory taught me detachment. And Daria. Daria had taught me the most dangerous lesson of all, that love could be transactional, that affection had to be earned through usefulness. And I had spent so many years trying to earn it. I wasn't that girl anymore. But part of me still ached for her. The money came through a few weeks later. I donated it to a scholarship fund at the local high school where I'd graduated, specifically for students in foster care or experiencing homelessness. I didn't want a penny from Owen. Meanwhile, word got around. Savannah may be charming, but it's not big. And circles like Judith's talk. A former caterer I'd worked with at the wedding told me he'd heard Judith was mortified over how things had turned out. That her social circle had started to distance itself, and Marcus' family was re-evaluating Daria's involvement in some of their investments. I should have felt vindicated. But mostly, I just felt tired. Then came the letter. It arrived in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Daria's. Rowan, I don't know where to start, or if you'll even read this. Maybe I should have done this sooner. Maybe it's too late. I know I messed everything up. I know I used you. And I'm not writing this to excuse it, I just want to tell you the truth. Or at least some version of it I think you deserve. I was jealous of you. Not in the obvious way. Not your clothes or your career or anything like that. I was jealous that you got out. That you left that house and made something of yourself. That you built something that didn't depend on other people's names or money or opinions. I've always needed approval, first from my parents, then from Marcus, then from everyone watching online. You didn't. You were stronger than I ever was, and I hated you for it. I didn't know how to be your friend anymore without confronting the fact that I had failed you. So I pretended you were still the girl who needed me. That way, I didn't have to admit how much I needed you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear it from me before someone else turned it into gossip. I'm sorry. For everything. Daria, I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I just read it again. And again. And something inside me began to loosen. It wasn't absolution. But it was something. A few days later, Priya and I sat down to review upcoming contracts. She glanced at my calendar and said, "You know, you've got a 3-day gap in mid-November. You should take a break. Go somewhere." I looked out the window. Maybe I would. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, I could go somewhere that wasn't about work, or people-pleasing, or proving my worth. Just me. My name. My time. My choice. I wasn't there yet. But I was closer. 2 months passed before I heard from Daria again. This time, it was through a mutual acquaintance, someone I barely knew professionally but had done business with on a few weddings. She forwarded me an email Daria had sent, asking for a quiet referral to a new planner. Apparently, she was trying to restart a lifestyle blog and needed someone to coordinate an influencer-heavy rebranding event. Should I respond? The acquaintance asked, clearly aware of the history. No, I replied. But if she mentions my name again, let her know I'm booked. Forever. I thought that was the end of it. I truly did. But a few weeks later, I was at a vendor expo in Charleston, there to support a few up-and-coming Black-owned businesses I'd been mentoring, when I noticed something odd. Daria and Marcus were there. Not attending. Exhibiting. They had launched a new business, a luxury event venue located an hour outside Savannah, in a renovated farmhouse that Marcus' family had purchased. The signage was impressive. The branding clean. Their booth included a scale model of the space, marketing brochures, and a list of preferred vendor partners. That's when I saw it. Magnolia Event Company was listed, prominently, under planning and design. I laughed. Not out of amusement. Out of disbelief. They had used my name. Without permission. After everything. I didn't make a scene. I didn't storm the booth or confront them. Instead, I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and walked away. By the next morning, my attorney had a cease and desist drafted and ready to go. We sent it certified mail to both the business and their home address. We also filed a formal complaint with the event expo's organizers, providing proof of unauthorized use of my brand. But I wasn't done. I contacted every vendor listed on their preferred sheet, some I knew, some I didn't, and explained that my business had been falsely advertised as affiliated with the venue. A few of them were shocked. One had already turned down another job for a soft opening at the farmhouse. Word traveled fast. Vendors started backing out. Then came the final piece. There's a certain luxury bridal publication based in Charleston that I had worked with for years. They were planning a feature on up-and-coming Southern venues, and I had originally been tapped to write a guest column for it. Instead of pulling the plug on the article, I asked to rewrite it with a new focus, red flags in venue marketing. The editor loved it. The piece went viral in the small but elite Southern event community. I didn't name Daria or Marcus directly, but the descriptions were unmistakable: new venues boasting unauthorized partnerships, misleading affiliations with planners, lack of transparency in vendor contracts. The same week the article ran, their venue's Instagram account quietly removed several tags, updated their vendor list, and locked comments on most of their posts. Their soft launch was cancelled due to unforeseen scheduling issues. A month later, their business website went down for maintenance. It stayed down. I never heard from them again. But vendors started thanking me. Quietly. Some shared stories of their own, times they'd been used, underpaid, or misrepresented by clients with more money than matters. It opened a bigger conversation in the industry about boundaries, contracts, and the cost of silence. That, in the end, was my revenge. Not the public humiliation. Not the slow unraveling of their carefully built image. But the quiet dismantling of their influence. I didn't need to destroy them. I just stopped letting them use me. Judith, as far as I know, never reached out again. Mallory sent a friend request on Facebook that I ignored. Marcus tried to follow me on Instagram. I blocked him before his profile photo finished loading. And Daria? She faded. Which is, I think, what always terrified her most. That without people like me propping her up, she might disappear. Meanwhile, I stayed visible. I took the trip Priya had suggested, flew to Vermont for a long weekend, stayed in a quiet inn, drank cider in thick socks, and read a whole book without checking my phone once. I took more of those trips after that. I worked less, lived more, and reminded myself often, survival is not the same as peace. For years, I believed being quiet would earn me safety. Now, I know better. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is speak up. Not with rage. Not with fire. But with clarity, certainty, and just enough grace to make them feel the weight of what they lost. And I never paid for their silence again.